The entire galaxy feared me. For drinking water. From criminal to saint with just one sip. Alex Thompson was lost. His spaceship, a sleek vessel designed for deep space exploration, had malfunctioned during a routine mission, forcing him to crash land on Zorvax, a planet so alien it made his head spin. He was an astronaut, trained to handle the unknown, but nothing in his years with the Earth Space Agency had prepared him for this. Zorvax was a riot of color. The sky shimmered with shades of purple and orange, reflecting off jagged peaks of crimson rock. The air buzzed with the hum of strange insects, their wings flashing like tiny rainbows. But what fascinated Alex most were the Zorvaxians themselves. They were tall, slender beings with scales that shifted between vibrant hues, reds, blues, yellows, depending on their mood. Their eyes glowed like polished jewels, and they moved with a grace that seemed almost liquid. Alex watched them from a distance at first, hiding behind a boulder near one of their bustling cities. The Zorvaxians didn't drink water. Instead, they gathered around fountains that bubbled with thick, colorful liquids, bright green, deep violet, glowing gold. They dipped their hands into these pools, and their scales absorbed the energy, making them shimmer even brighter. It was mesmerizing, but it also made Alex's throat ache. He hadn't had a drink in hours, and his small water bottle, tucked inside his survival pack, was his only lifeline. He learned quickly that water was a taboo here. The Zorvaxians called it deadly acid, spitting the words with fear and disgust. Alex overheard their stories as he crept closer to the city, piecing together their history. Long ago, they had evolved from sea creatures living near underwater volcanoes. Back then, clean water had been toxic to them, a poison that dissolved their fragile bodies. Over generations, they'd adapted to survive on the planet's colorful, mineral-rich liquids, and the idea of water as a deadly threat had become a cornerstone of their culture. For Alex, this was a problem. Humans needed water to live, and he couldn't survive on their strange drinks. He'd tried sipping a tiny drop of the green liquid once, out of desperation, but it burned his tongue and made his stomach churn. So, he kept his water bottle hidden, drinking in secret whenever he could. That plan worked until the day he got careless. It was late afternoon, and the twin sons of Zorvax beat down mercilessly. Alex had been scavenging for food in the city's marketplace, a chaotic sprawl of stalls and shouting vendors. His cloak, stolen from an abandoned cart, hid his human features, but the heat was unbearable. His mouth felt like sandpaper, and he couldn't wait any longer. Slipping into a narrow alley, he pulled out his water bottle. The clear liquid glinted in the sunlight as he unscrewed the cap and took a long, satisfying gulp. A scream shattered the moment. Deadly acid! A small Zorvaxian child shrieked, its scales paling to a sickly gray. The child had been playing nearby and had seen everything. Before Alex could react, it bolted into the marketplace, yelling at the top of its lungs. He's drinking the deadly acid. Help! Panic erupted. Zorvaxians dropped their baskets and spun toward Alex, their eyes wide with terror. He's poisoning himself, one shouted. He'll kill us all, cried another. The crowd surged, a wave of color and noise, and Alex tried to back away, hands raised in surrender. I'm not hurting anyone, he yelled, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Guards arrived within moments, tall Zorvaxians in armor that gleamed like molten lava. They grabbed him, their grip bruising, and snatched the water bottle from his hand. You're under arrest, the lead guard snarled, holding the bottle like it was a bomb, for carrying a deadly substance and threatening our people. The crowd jeered as the guards dragged Alex through the streets. Deport the water witch, they chanted, their voices rising in unison. Deport the water witch. Some threw handfuls of dirt, others spat at his feet. Alex's heart pounded, but he kept his head high. He hadn't done anything wrong, at least not by human standards. They locked him in a cell beneath the city, a damp stone box with no windows. His water bottle was gone, taken as evidence, and he was left to wonder what would happen next. He knew one thing for sure. On Zorvax, drinking water wasn't just strange, it was a crime, and he was about to pay the price. The guards didn't waste time. By the next morning, Alex was hauled out of his cell and marched to the city's grand courthouse. His trial was about to begin, and he had no idea how to defend himself in a world that saw his most basic need as a threat. The courthouse loomed like a cathedral of fire, its red crystal walls soaring into the violet sky, refracting the twin suns' light into prismatic cascades that stung Alex's eyes. Inside, the air was heavy, saturated with the cloying sweetness of the Zorvaxians' colorful liquids, vivid greens, molten golds, and pulsing purples, bubbling in ornate basins carved into the walls. Their faint hum vibrated through the floor, a constant reminder of the alien world that now judged him. Alex stood in the center of a vast circular chamber, wrists bound by cords that shimmered like liquid starlight, their grip tight enough to bite into his skin. Around him, tiered seats rose in a steep amphitheater, packed with hundreds of Zorvaxians. Their scales flashed in a riot of colors: crimson fury, amber suspicion, sapphire curiosity, each shift betraying their emotions as they stared down at the human in their midst. At the chamber's head sat the Elder Council, 5 ancient figures perched on thrones of polished obsidian. Their scales, dulled to the gray of weathered stone, seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it, and their eyes glowed with a dim, unyielding authority. The lead elder, a towering Zorvaxian whose presence filled the room like a storm, rose slowly. His voice, deep and resonant as rolling thunder, cut through the murmurs. He slammed a crystalline gavel against a pedestal, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Silence," he roared. "We gather to judge the human, Alex Thompson, for the heinous crime of possessing and consuming the deadly acid known as water." The word water landed like a curse, igniting gasps and hisses from the crowd. Scales flickered in unison, a wave of pale grays and sickly yellows signaling fear. Alex felt the weight of their gazes, each one a needle pricking his skin. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his pulse hammering, but he forced his shoulders back, chin high, determined to mask the dread churning in his gut. The prosecutor glided forward, a sleek Zorvaxian with emerald scales that gleamed like polished jade. His smile was sharp, predatory, and his movements carried the confidence of someone who thrived on spectacle. "Your Excellencies," he began, his voice smooth yet laced with theatrical venom, "this human is a blight upon our sacred planet. His actions threaten our very existence, and we have irrefutable proof of his guilt." With a flourish, he gestured to a massive screen that descended from the ceiling, its surface shimmering like liquid metal before a video flared to life. The footage captured Alex in the alley, his water bottle raised, the clear liquid catching the sunlight as he drank. The crowd gasped, scales paling, as the video looped relentlessly, each repetition twisting the act into something sinister. The prosecutor's voice rose, dripping with scorn. "Behold how he flaunts the deadly acid. He drinks it with brazen defiance, mocking our laws, endangering our people. This is no mere mistake. It is a declaration of war against our way of life." Alex's fists clenched, the cords cutting deeper into his wrists. "That's not true," he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. A guard jabbed him in the ribs with a blunt weapon, pain flaring as he staggered but held his ground. The crowd jeered, their chants of "water witch" swelling into a rhythmic tide. The prosecutor paced before the council, his scales glinting with every calculated step. "This human dares claim water is harmless, but we know the truth. Our sacred texts speak of the ancient seas, where clear liquids devoured our ancestors, dissolving their flesh in agony. It is written, clear liquids are death. Yet he carries this poison among us, perhaps plotting to taint our fountains, to unravel the fabric of our society." He paused, letting his words sink in, then leaned toward the elders, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Who knows what other dangers this outsider hides?" The crowd roared, a surge of fury that shook the chamber's crystal walls. "Deport him," they screamed. "Banish the water witch." The words crashed over Alex, each one a stone piling onto his chest. His knees trembled, but he locked them, refusing to collapse. He wasn't a criminal. He was just a man trying to survive. But how could he make them see that? The lead elder raised a hand, and the room fell into a tense hush. His gaze, sharp despite its age, fixed on Alex. Does the accused have anything to say? Alex's heart pounded, his mouth dry as ash. This was his moment, his only chance to pierce their fear. He drew a shaky breath, steadying himself. Your Excellencies, I mean no harm. Water isn't poison to humans. It's what keeps us alive, like your colorful liquids sustain you. I didn't know it was forbidden here. I was only trying to survive. The prosecutor's laugh was a jagged blade, slicing through the air. Lies. He expects us to swallow this absurdity? Water is death, and he is a walking plague. His scales flared brighter, feeding off the crowd's renewed outrage. But the lead elder leaned forward, his eyes narrowing to slits. You claim water does not harm you? Yes, Alex said, voice firm despite the quiver in his hands. It's essential for my kind, just as your drinks are for yours. The crowd jeered, scales flashing in mockery, but a few Zorvaxians hesitated, their colors softening to muted blues of doubt. The lead elder stroked his chin, fingers tracing the grooves of his faded scales. A bold assertion. We must test its truth. The prosecutor's scales dulled for a fleeting moment, a flicker of unease, but he recovered swiftly, bowing with mock deference. Very well. Let him prove it, if he dares. A guard approached, carrying a glass of clear water on a tray, handling it as if it were a live explosive. The crowd leaned forward, their collective breath held, scales shimmering in anticipation. Alex's hands shook as he reached for the glass, the cord around his wrists making his movements clumsy. He knew this was a gamble. Surviving the act might sway them, or it might cement their belief that he was an unnatural threat. The water gleamed, cool and inviting, a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos around him. Raising it to his lips, he drank deeply, the liquid soothing his raw throat, washing away the dust of fear. When he finished, he set the glass down with deliberate care and stood tall, unharmed, his gaze locked on the elders. A murmur rippled through the chamber, soft at first, then growing. He's alive, a young Zorvaxian whispered, scales shifting to a curious teal. It didn't kill him, another echoed, voice tinged with awe. A mother in the back clutched her child closer, her scales flickering between fear and fascination. The lead elder's eyes widened, a spark of intrigue breaking through his stoic mask. Remarkable. The water spared him. The prosecutor sputtered, his composure cracking. This proves nothing. It may spare him, but it could still destroy us. He's an alien. His body is not ours. He turned to the crowd, arms wide, rallying their fear. Will you let this outsider mock our sacred laws? Will you risk your children's lives on his word? The elder nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Perhaps. His immunity does not prove safety for Zorvaxians. We must consider this carefully. Alex's hope, fragile as a candle flame, flickered. He'd passed their test, but it wasn't enough. The council's fear ran deeper than logic, rooted in centuries of myth. The crowd's chants resumed, softer now, but no less menacing. Deport the Water Witch. The words followed him as the guards seized his arms, their grip bruising, and marched him back to his cell. In the dungeon's cold embrace, Alex slumped against the stone wall, exhaustion sinking into his bones. The trial had been a battle, and he'd fought with everything he had, but the Zorvaxians weren't ready to hear him. Their fear was a wall, built on stories older than their city, and he was just one man against it. Yet, as he closed his eyes, a faint sound reached him, a whisper beyond the walls, a murmur of doubt among the people. Someone out there was listening. Someone was wondering. Outside the prison, a spark had caught. In the shadows of the city, a young Zorvaxian girl named Zara replayed the trial in her mind, her pink scales glowing with a question that refused to fade. What if he's right? Days bled into one another in the dungeon, each hour darker and more oppressive than the last. The air hung heavy with the sour reek of decay, mold and damp stone mingling into a stench that coated Alex's tongue. A feeble sliver of light pierced through a jagged crack high in the wall, its glow too weak to banish the shadows that danced across the cell. The cold was a living thing, seeping into his marrow, stiffening his joints until every movement ached. But worse than the chill was the thirst. His lips split and bled. His throat burned with every shallow breath, and his tongue felt like a foreign object, swollen and useless. The guards offered nothing, their scales flickering nervously as they muttered about the alien poison that might spill from their vibrant, mineral-rich liquids. Trapped in this alien prison, caught in a web of misunderstanding, Alex felt his strength ebb away like water through clenched fists. Slumped against the rough wall, his vision swam, edges blurring into a haze. His head throbbed with a dull, relentless pulse, and his legs refused to obey, heavy as stone. Days without water had ravaged him. His heartbeat stuttered, weak and erratic, while his mind flickered with half-formed memories of Earth, the grueling survival drills of astronaut training, the laughter of his family around his sunlit table. Was this how it ended? Not in a blaze of glory among the stars, but in a forgotten cell on a dying planet? Despair clawed at him, but he shoved it back, clinging to a fragile thread of hope. He had to make them see. Beyond the dungeon's walls, however, a spark was igniting. Zara was a wisp of a Zorvaxian, her soft pink scales catching the light as she darted through the city's edges. She'd stood among the crowd at Alex's trial, her small frame dwarfed by the towering adults, watching as he drank the deadly acid and emerged unscathed. Their shouts of rage had echoed around her, scales flashing crimson and gold, but Zara felt only a quiet thrill. Why hadn't he writhed in agony? Why hadn't the liquid melted him from within, as the elders warned? The questions gnawed at her, bold and persistent, refusing to fade. One twilight, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Zara wandered near the prison, kicking at pebbles in the dust. Amid a pile of discarded junk behind the guardhouse, something glinted. Alex's water bottle, cast aside like a cursed relic. Her pulse quickened as she snatched it up, her tiny hands trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. The liquid inside was still, clear as glass, a stark contrast to the swirling, vivid drinks she knew. She replayed the trial in her mind. Alex's steady grip, his calm sip, the absence of pain. What if the stories were wrong? With a quick glance over her shoulder, Zara twisted off the cap. Her scales paled with nerves, but curiosity burned brighter. She tipped the bottle, letting a single drop touch her tongue, and braced for the worst. Instead, a cool rush flooded her senses, soothing and pure, like a breeze after a storm. Her scales shivered with delight, and a jolt of energy surged through her, sharp and alive. It wasn't just good, it was exhilarating. She drank again, gulping until the bottle was empty, and a laugh bubbled up as a strange, buoyant lightness filled her chest. For the first time, she felt truly herself. She told no one. The adults would scold her, strip her of her freedom, maybe even cage her like Alex. The thought tightened her throat, but the water's secret pulsed within her. It hadn't harmed her. It had awakened her. And if it could do that for her, what might it do for others? In the dungeon, Alex teetered on the edge of collapse. His body screamed for relief, his mind slipping into a fog where reality and delirium blurred. Leaning against the wall, his breath ragged, he noticed something, a faint pattern in the stone, etched deep and ancient. The carvings were weathered, their edges softened by time, but they called to him, a lifeline in the dark. With what strength remained, he dragged himself closer, fingers brushing the symbols as if they might speak. They did. Fragments of his training surfaced, hours spent decoding lost scripts from distant worlds, and he pieced the story together, word by painstaking word. Zorvax had once been a paradise of flowing rivers, its people nourished by water as pure as Earth's. But a volcanic cataclysm had torn it apart, spewing toxins that tainted the streams and lakes. To survive, The Zorvaxians turned to the colorful liquids rising from the planet's core, their bodies adapting over centuries to crave the very minerals that now poison them. The truth about water faded into legend, twisted into a tale of terror to preserve their new existence. The final inscription seared into his mind. The land withers under the colors. Only the pure liquid can cleanse the toxins and heal the world. Water wasn't their doom, it was their deliverance. A rush of clarity cut through his exhaustion. The colorful liquids weren't just tradition. They were a slow death, choking the soil, wilting the plants, tainting the air with a faint, bitter edge he'd sensed on his journey here. The Zorvaxians were blind to their own decay, but he saw it. He had to show them. The cell door groaned open, snapping him from his thoughts. Zara slipped inside, her eyes wide with urgency, clutching a flask. "I brought you something," she whispered, pressing it into his hands. Water, drawn from a hidden spring she'd found beyond the city's reach. Alex drank, the liquid a balm to his ravaged throat, strength seeping back into his limbs. He met Zara's gaze, his cracked lips curving into a smile. "Thank you, Zara. You're braver than you know." Her scales glowed brighter, pride mingling with purpose. "I drank some too. It didn't hurt me. It felt good. But my friend Kale is sick. The colorful liquids aren't helping him. Can water fix him?" Alex's mind raced. "It might. Take me to him." Zara hesitated, glancing at the door. "The guards, they'll stop us." "We'll be quick," he said. "You're small and clever. Can you draw them away?" She nodded, determination hardening her features. Leading him to the threshold, she peeked out, then bolted into the corridor. Moments later, her voice rang out, high and frantic. "Help! A huge rat's in the storage room. It's got claws." The guards cursed, their boots stomping after her, and Alex seized the chance, slipping into the shadows. Zara rejoined him at the corridor's end, grinning. "They're chasing shadows now. Hurry!" Together, they wove through the city's quiet fringes, the twin suns sinking into a fiery dusk. They reached a humble hut of vine and clay, where Kale lay on a mat, his scales faded to a sickly gray, his chest rising in faint, uneven gasps. His parents stood watch, their faces carved with anguish. "He's been fading for days," his mother murmured, her voice breaking. The healers tried everything. Alex knelt beside the boy, noting the symptoms: dulled scales, shallow breath, a body buckling under unseen weight. The carving's warning echoed in his head. Toxins, leeching life away. "I need water," he said. Kale's father recoiled. "The deadly acid? You'll kill him." Zara stepped forward, unflinching. "It's not deadly. I drank it, and I'm stronger than ever. Trust Alex, he knows." The parents wavered, caught between terror and a flicker of hope. Kale's mother brushed her son's forehead, tears glistening on her scales. "We've lost every other path," she whispered. "Try." Alex tipped the flask, letting a few drops fall onto Kale's tongue. The boy sputtered, then lay still. Silence gripped the room, thick and suffocating. Then, a shimmer, a faint glow spreading across Kale's scales, color blooming like dawn. His eyes fluttered open, and a weak smile curved his lips. "I feel better." His mother's sob broke the quiet, her arms wrapping around him as tears fell freely. His father stared at Alex, wonder overtaking dread. "Ow, your planet's poisoned," Alex said, voice steady. "The colorful liquids you rely on. They're toxic, slowly killing you and the land. Water can flush it out, heal you, bring Zorvax back." Kale's father shook his head, stunned. "We were taught it was death itself. How could we be so lost?" "The truth was buried," Alex replied. "But it's not gone." By morning, whispers of the miracle had drawn a crowd to the hut's doorstep. Zorvaxians pressed close, scales flickering with every emotion: disbelief, yearning, suspicion. Some carried their own ailing kin, pleading for a taste of the cure. Others murmured doubts, clinging to the elders' tales. Alex stepped into the light, flask raised, knowing the fight for their future was only beginning. The crowd outside Kale's hut had been growing steadily since dawn, swelling with each passing hour. Zorvaxians of all ages and colors press close, their scales flickering with a mix of confusion, hope, and fear. Some had come out of sheer curiosity, drawn by the wild rumors of a human who drank the deadly acid and lived. Others were skeptics, their arms crossed and their eyes narrowed, ready to dismiss the whole thing as a hoax. But many were desperate, families with sick loved ones, clutching the hands of children whose scales had dulled from illness, hoping for a miracle. Alex could hear their murmurs as he stood just inside the hut, his heart pounding. "Is it true?" One Zorvaxian whispered to another. "Can water really heal?" The other shook his head, his scales flashing a dubious yellow. "It's a trick. The elders say it's poison. Why would they lie?" But then there were voices like Kale's mother, who stood near the front, her voice trembling with conviction. "My son was dying, and the humans saved him. I saw it with my own eyes." Her words rippled through the crowd, sparking debates. Some nodded in agreement, while others scoffed. "Maybe it's a fluke," a grizzled Zorvaxian muttered. "Or maybe the boy wasn't as sick as he thought." Alex took a deep breath, gripping his flask of water tightly. His hands were sweaty, and his stomach churned with nerves. He wasn't a hero. He was just an astronaut who'd crashed on a wrong planet. But these people needed him, and he couldn't turn away now. Steeling himself, he stepped out of the hut and into the open. The crowd fell silent, hundreds of jewel-like eyes fixing on him. Alex raised the flask high, the clear water glinting in the sunlight. "This isn't poison," he shouted, his voice cracking slightly but growing stronger. "It's what your planet needs to survive." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. Some Zorvaxians leaned forward, intrigued, while others stepped back, their scales paling with fear. "He's mad," someone hissed. But Kale's father pushed his way to the front, his voice booming. "He saved my son. Listen to him." Before Alex could continue, a commotion erupted at the edge of the crowd. The Elder Council had arrived, their ornate robes billowing as they strode forward, flanked by a dozen guards in gleaming armor. The lead elder, a towering figure with scales that blazed a furious red, pointed a clawed finger at Alex. "Seize the human," he bellowed. "He's spreading lies and endangering our people." The guards surged forward, their weapons raised, but the crowd reacted instinctively. Dozens of Zorvaxians moved to block their path, forming a protective barrier around Alex. "Wait!" Kale's mother cried, her voice sharp with desperation. "He's not lying. Look at my son. He's alive because of water." Zara darted through the crowd, her small frame slipping between legs until she stood beside Alex. "I drank it too," she declared, her voice clear and brave. "It's not deadly, it's good." The lead elder's eyes narrowed to slits. "Silence, child. You've been deceived by this outsider's tricks." But the crowd was shifting, the energy changing. A few Zorvaxians stepped forward, clutching small containers they'd hidden under their cloaks. "We've tried it," one said, his voice trembling but firm. "We drank the water, and it didn't kill us. It made us stronger." Another nodded, holding up a vial of clear liquid. "My aches are gone. I haven't felt this good in years." The elder's face twisted with rage, his scales pulsing with crimson light. "This is treason. Water is death. Our ancestors perished in its grasp, and you dare to defy their wisdom." Alex saw his opening. "No," he said, stepping forward, his voice steady. "Water is life. Your colorful liquids are poisoning Zorvax. I found proof in the dungeon. Ancient texts carved into the stone. They say water can save your world." The crowd buzzed with shock, their scales flickering in a riot of colors. The elder snarled, his claws flexing. "Lies! There are no such texts. Arrest them all." But the guards hesitated, their weapons lowering slightly. One of them, a young Zorvaxian with blue scales, glanced at Kale, who was now standing beside his mother, his color vibrant and healthy. Another guard whispered to his comrade, "I saw the boy yesterday. He was at death's door. Now look at him." Doubt crept into their ranks, and Alex seized the moment. He turned to the crowd and spotted an elderly Zorvaxian woman, her scales nearly black with illness, leaning heavily on a cane. Her breath came in ragged gasps, and her eyes were clouded with pain. "Please," Alex said gently, pouring water into a cup and offering it to her. "Try this." The woman hesitated, her hand trembling as she reached for the cup. The crowd held its breath, watching her every move. She brought the cup to her lips, took a small sip, then another. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, her scales began to brighten, the darkness lifting like a shadow chased by sunlight. She straightened, her cane clattering to the ground, and tears welled in her eyes. "It's true," she whispered, her voice strong and clear. "I feel alive again." A collective gasp rose from the crowd. "She's healed," someone shouted. The water healed her. That was the breaking point. The Zorvaxians surged forward, their fear melting into awe. "Water Saint! Water Saint!" they chanted, their voices rising in a joyous roar. They turned on the council, demanding answers, their scales blazing with newfound defiance. The lead elder, seeing his authority crumble, signaled the guards to retreat. "This isn't over," he hissed, his voice barely audible over the uproar. "You'll regret this, human." But his threat was lost in the crowd's fervor, and he was forced to withdraw, his robes billowing as he stormed away. In the days that followed, Alex became a reluctant hero. With Zara's help, he began teaching the Zorvaxians how to use water, cleaning their polluted fountains, healing the sick, and even watering the dying plants that dotted the barren landscape. At first, they treated it like a forbidden treasure, giggling nervously as they poured it on their gardens. "I'm committing a crime," one Zorvaxian shouted, half joking, as green shoots sprouted from the soil where he'd watered. The sight of life returning to the land filled them with wonder. But not everyone embraced the change. The Elder Council, though weakened, refused to surrender. They launched a fierce campaign against Alex, calling him a tradition destroyer and an invader of lies. Posters appeared overnight in the city, depicting Alex as a shadowy figure clutching a water bottle, his eyes glowing with malice. The captions read, "Beware the Water Witch. He seeks to ruin our culture." The council's loyalists spread rumors, whispering that Alex was a spy sent to weaken Zorvax for an invasion. They bribed influential Zorvaxians to speak out against him, and even threatened those who dared to support the water movement. One such loyalist, a cunning Zorvaxian named Vrax, made it his mission to undermine Alex at every turn. He sabotaged water distribution efforts, spreading fear that the deadly acid would eventually turn on them. Despite these efforts, the water movement grew. Secret networks sprang up, with Zorvaxians trading water like smugglers dealing in contraband. They met in hidden groves, sharing stories of healing and hope, their scales glowing with excitement. "It's like a drug," one whispered, "but better, it's life." The division deepened, splitting families and friends. Some clung to the old ways, hoarding their colorful liquids and shunning water, while others embraced the change, their bodies and spirits revitalized. The planet stood on the edge of something monumental, a cultural revolution that Alex had unwittingly sparked. But as the tension mounted, Alex knew he couldn't stay. He wasn't a leader or a savior. He was just a man who'd stumbled into the truth. The Zorvaxians needed to find their own path, to face their fears and rebuild their world without him. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Zara found him sitting alone by a newly purified fountain. "You're leaving, aren't you?" she asked, her voice small but steady. Alex nodded. "This is your fight now, Zara. You and your people have to decide what Zorvax will become." She sat beside him, her scales shimmering in the fading light. "But you showed us the truth. You gave us a chance. And that's all I can do," he said gently. "The rest is up to you." Zara hugged him tightly, her small arms surprisingly strong. "Thank you, Water Saint." Alex smiled, ruffling her hair. "Just Alex, kid. Just Alex." As he prepared to leave, the chants of Water Saint and Tradition Destroyer echoed through the city, a testament to the battle still raging. But Alex knew that, in time, the truth would win. It always did. Alex stood at the edge of the city, his repaired ship gleaming under the twin suns. Zorvax was changing, but not without cost. Arguments echoed through the streets, conservatives clashing with reformers, families splitting over cups of water. He'd given them the truth, but what they did with it was up to them. Zara and Kale came to say goodbye, their scales bright with health. "You saved us," Zara said, hugging him tightly. "No," Alex replied, smiling. "You saved yourselves. You were brave enough to question." As he climbed into his ship, the chants of Water Saint and Tradition Destroyer mingled in the air. He lifted off, watching Zorvax shrink below him, a world caught between its past and its future. In the quiet of space, Alex reflected on what he'd learned. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing wasn't what you consumed, but the stories you built to control others. The Zorvaxians had feared water because of a lie, a myth that had shaped their lives. He'd called them aliens, but they were the ones estranged from their own history, blind to the solution right in front of them. Humans weren't stronger or smarter, he thought. They were just stubborn enough to challenge the unknown with kindness and truth. That was their gift, one he hoped Zorvax would come to share. As the ship sped toward Earth, Alex smiled. He'd survived, and maybe he'd planted a seed that would grow into something better. For now, that was enough. Stay tuned for part 2, when the Zorvaxians discover iced tea.